Hello everyone! Welcome today to Indian Story Read Along. Today our story is going to be an illustrated picture book, and this is called Divali Rose. And so if you live in the south of India, or you're from the south, your family is, then you'll also be calling it Deepavali. But Diwali is something that is it's a term that's known all over the world, known as the Hindu Festival of Lights. This book by Vashanti Rahaman, and at the bottom here you'll see it is illustrated by Jamel Akib. This is an award-winning book, and it's award-winning not just because it's about Diwali, but because it is about how people are different all over the world. Let's get started. Divali Rose. One thing you should know about this story. So, this story is about people of Indian descent who are now living in Trinidad. Some of these people, their ancestors were brought over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago to work as people who were almost slave laborers. They were paid, but very, very little. And that was alongside people brought from Africa to work as slaves who were not paid anything at all. So those people's descendants lived in Trinidad and other places in the West Indies, and they cultivated and grew a culture that is all their own. Also, in recent days, more people have been moving from India to places in the West Indies as well. So this story is about those two groups of people. So here we are. Ricki was leaving for school when he saw the two rosebuds. They were on the bush he had helped Grandpa plant. Whenever Ricki asked what color the new roses would be, all Grandpa would say was, "Diwali color for a Diwali rose." Ricki could not imagine what Diwali color might be. So there he is, looking at those two rosebuds. So he gently bent the tip of one bud, hoping to see a hint of color, and the rosebud snapped off. Fear and worry darkened Ricki's mind. At first, his feet refused to move. Then he raced down the path to school. Look at him, so worried. Even his art teacher talked about Diwali. This is a time to remember that we can all be lights, chasing away the darkness of fear and worry, she said, as they got ready to paint. Ricki painted a single diya, or oil lamp, near a single rosebud. Like he's still thinking about that rosebud, he snapped. That evening, Grandpa was grumpy. "Somebody meddled with his rose bush," said Grandma. "I tell you is the India people," said Grandpa. "Who else could it be?" "And I tell you not to accuse people of mischief just because they different," said Grandma. Ricki decided that this wasn't a good time to talk about the rosebud accident. And there's Grandma and Grandpa. Grandpa began guarding the rosebush day and night. Ricki sat with him often and watched the remaining rosebud open a little more each day. On the inside, the red petals were streaked with yellow and orange. "You see," Grandpa said, "Diwali color is the color of fire." Whenever the India people's children passed by the house, Grandpa jumped up shouting, "See them watching? Waiting for me to stop watching?" Then Ricki would think, "Tomorrow will be a better time. I'll tell him about it tomorrow." On the night before Diwali, Ricki asked Ma, "Why Grandpa is always blaming India people for something and saying how they different and bad. They is Indian, just like us." "Not just like us," said Ma, putting water on to boil for evening tea. "They only just come here. Our family come from India more than 100 years ago." "But even if they is different, that is no reason for Grandpa to be afraid of them," said Ricki. "You right, child," said Ma. Ricki took the tea to Grandpa and watched him sip it. "You know that picture your grandma have of her father and mother?" said Grandpa after a while. "The one on her dresser?" asked Ricki. "Bring it here," said Grandpa. And there he is, sipping his tea. "Now them is real Indians," said Grandpa. "Them people who only now come from India, they not like that at all." "But we not like that either," said Ricki. "I don't think I could be like one of those long ago people that first come from India to Trinidad." "Me neither," said Grandpa. "It's not easy to leave home and go someplace where you different from everybody else. Them long ago Indian people didn't have it easy when they first come here. My own grandfather used to tell me about it. They didn't have it easy at all." "Just like them new India people, eh, Grandpa?" said Ricki. "So," I think he's got him there. "So, what they teach you about Divali in school?" asked Grandpa, changing the subject. And there he is. He's looking at his ancestors. And I wonder what Grandpa's thinking. Who is a real Indian, who is not? "One teacher say Diwali come like a new year," said Ricki. "You have to make peace with everybody and start new for the new year." Grandpa was quiet for a long time. Finally he sat up. "You and that teacher have a point," he said. "Come with me." "But I have something to tell you," said Ricki. "Later," said Grandpa. And there they are talking, and then there's that one Divali rose blooming right there. Grandpa took out his pocket knife and cut the stem of the Divali rose. "What are you doing?" cried Ricki. "Come," said Grandpa. Ricki followed him down the road to the India people's house. And there he is. There's Grandpa, and then there's that Divali rose. A woman opened the door and Grandpa gave her his rose. "It is clean, no pesticide," he said. "You can use it however you want. But when you send the children in my yard for flowers, for your prayers, you must tell them to ask me instead of picking the flowers themselves. That is how we do things here." "That is how we do things too," said the woman. With a puzzled look, she took the rose. "I would never send them to pick other people's flowers without asking first." "Then who meddled with my new rose bush?" asked Grandpa. "It was me," whispered Ricki. "That is the thing I was trying to say." The India lady smiled at him gently. "Don't be afraid," she said. "You are a good child." Grandpa and Ricki walked home in silence. The next evening, after prayers, Ma and Pa filled new diyas with coconut oil. Grandpa and Ricki followed after them with cotton wicks. A wick is a tiri. It's a little tiny piece of cotton that you roll into a long string type of thing. You put that in the diya and it burns for a long time. Finally, Grandma lit the little lamps. Then they watched as neighbors lit diyas too, along railings and walkways. Ma had just gone in to set out dinner when a boy came up the front steps. He gave a covered dish to Grandma and quickly ran off. Grandma lifted the lid. "The India people send their special milk sweet," she said to Grandpa. Ricki saw that the dish was filled with little white balls made from milk curds soaking in syrup, probably rasgulla. There was something else too. "Grandpa," he cried, "look!" Floating on the syrup were the flame-like petals of the Divali rose. "Ah," said Grandpa to Ricki, "those India people are good neighbors, not so?" Ricki smiled, and for the first time since he had broken off the rosebud, fear and worry faded from his mind. And that's the end of that beautiful story. So I'm going to read this author's note because when I was a little girl, and I'm sure a lot of you watching, you don't understand how people think that other people are different. And sometimes I still don't understand. So let's read what the author is saying about how Diwali is celebrated in different places. And she's from Trinidad too. So this is interesting for me too. Diwali, the Festival of Lights. Divali Rose is set in Trinidad, the Caribbean island where I was born. Of all the many holidays in Trinidad, Diwali is my favorite. It is a Hindu festival that comes around the time of year when nights begin to grow longer in the northern hemisphere. The festival is a reminder that light will follow darkness and good will triumph over evil. It is a time when observant Hindus try to repay debts and end quarrels. Religious observances around Diwali actually take place over several days, but on the night when rows and rows of lights are lit, all Trinidadians celebrate. On that night, people light diyas, little clay lamps filled with vegetable oil. Many people line the paths to their homes with these lamps, and there are elaborate public displays with hundreds of diyas. Of course, no festival is complete without good food. Trinidadians love Indian food, especially the sweets and flatbreads called roti. People, when Trinidadians speak of Trinidad Indians, they are not referring to the descendants of the island's original inhabitants. They are referring to descendants of people who had been brought from India more than 100 years ago to work in Trinidad's sugar plantations. These Indians joined the astonishing mixture of peoples from countries near and far who already lived there. It took time, but the descendants of all the people who settled in Trinidad came to know each other and share customs. In Trinidad, people of different religious faiths celebrate important religious festivals with each other. Besides Diwali, other religious days that are public holidays include Christmas, as well as Eid ul-Fitr, the Muslim festival that marks the end of Ramadan. Language. English is the language of Trinidad. Besides standard English, Trinidadians also speak their own English dialect, which reflects their rich cultural heritage. In Divali Rose, I have tried to capture some of the flavor and rhythm of Trinidadian speech without straying too far from standard English. So this was an awesome book. It showed how people, no matter how old they are, they can learn new things. Showed you how important it is to be honest, and it showed you how there's lots of happy endings, and people who you're not sure are going to be good neighbors end up being good neighbors. This was Divali Rose by Vashanti Rahaman and illustrated by Jamel Akib. Thanks so much for joining us today on Indian Story Read Along. Please join us again next time and think about subscribing if you like the story.